we have a report from February 24th saying Iran nears deal to buy supersonic anti-ship missiles from China, right? So
Yeah.
now, if we look at it, this Reuters report describes a deal that was near completion rather than one that has already resulted in physical deliveries. According to the report dated February 2026, Iran was in the final stages of negotiations to buy CM 302 supersonic anti ship missiles from China. These are highly advanced weapons that could threaten U.S. naval forces. There is no confirmed evidence that these specific completed that there is specific completed missile systems have been delivered in the last few days. As of March 8th, the focus of intelligence tracking has shifted to components and raw materials. Specifically, two Iranian ships were identified leaving China carrying sodium perchlorate and chemical essentials for making solid rocket fuel. So on March 3rd, 2026, the Chinese Foreign Ministry officially stated that reports of a potential missile sale to Iran were not true. So China denied it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your question again regarding this?
Like, do you think, even though it hasn't been confirmed and it's rumors now, do you think these reports could have been trigger for the US and Israel to move now and not like wait another 10 days?
Oh, okay, interesting. The trigger that I what has been the trigger was the information that Israeli intelligence from the ground had with regards to a Khamenei meeting in
Right.
in his home, like in his bunker. That was the trigger, and we knew that these military operations were planned way ahead of way before this news article came out, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think that was the trigger. There's two triggers. What triggered the plan for these military operations, that was the Iranian people coming out early January in the Lion and Sun Revolution,
Yeah.
showing to the Americans that regime change is possible. That was the original trigger that made the planning of this military operation, and then the execution of the military operation was the intelligence that the Israelis had regarding a meeting Khamenei was having.
Right.
So I don't think this was a trigger. And I don't think this would have made much of a difference if they have received these missiles, honestly. Like, it would basically, I don't think it would. I mean, Jeffrey could basically speak to that. Like, would that make I don't know if they received it or not, but I don't think it would make much of a difference. Go on, Jeffrey. Mhm.
So it was one of the triggers, the main trigger. I mean, so we already were going to take down the Mullah regime was planning on engaging in doing mass attacks anyway because their patron states, whether it's Putin's criminalized counterintelligence state or the Chinese Communist Party, had been telling them to do so as a means to sit there and try and stretch out United States-led Western alliances force capability across multiple theaters. The reason we chose to strike at the time we did was in combination of a couple of things. One is that there was Israeli intelligence. Well, first, our intelligence showed that the Mullah regime had upgraded its ballistic missiles and missiles in general from liquid to solid fuel with direct material support from the Chinese Communist Party, not the least of which was 27-foot tall, kind of like blenders to blend the very thing that you talked about and turn solid fuel missiles into, well, liquid fuel missiles into solid fuel missiles, which means they can be stored ready to go. You have very little warning time. It's not like it takes 8 hours to launch. Plus, the tempo that you can maintain in launching mass missiles with solid fuel missiles is roughly about 3 to 5 times what you could with liquid missiles, because liquid missiles take 8 hours to fuel and can't be stored ready to go. Because of that, plus with the intelligence, the Israeli intelligence that showed, and this actually General Avivi had mentioned just prior to the strike, there is a reasonable degree of probability the Mullah regime is marrying chem bio warheads to those missiles to mass launch against Israel, and what that would result in with leakers coming through in an uncontrolled chain of escalation. That's why we chose to go at the time we did. The support of anti-ship missiles is a secondary reason, further underwriting the threat, risk, and vulnerability assessment that said we had to strike sooner rather than later. Not that we shouldn't have went into Iraq. I'm just saying socioculturally, demographically, this is not the same animal. Yeah. So was it a contributing factor? It was a secondary contributing factor. As far as the impact of that, absolutely it has impact, right? I mean, long range strike, what is it? Like silkworms and the Noor and all the rest of that can hold things like shipping throughout the Strait of Hormuz at risk, which is one of the things the Mullah regime would do. And we knew that the Mullah regime was trying to hide behind all this stuff to sit there and realize its nuclear capability and then turn itself into a pseudo theocratically motivated version of North Korea. None of that's happened, and not under this administration. No, couldn't be. I mean, it would be unacceptable.
All right. So my question is, it seems like the regime is really, really, really falling apart. Like I heard that IRGC members just fleeing from the country, like dressed up as women, like every like member of IRGC, like high rank, gives different orders on the places, but still like other media like tries to make it look like the regime is still strong. So I just would be glad to like hear something like Carmen, if you have some, I don't know, insider information or like a better observation for that. So this is one question, and then I have the other part of it.
Yeah. So I mean the attack. So yeah. So the attacks by United States and Israel and the Islamic Republic have really been devastating. The people that have been removed, I don't know if how to explain. These are people that are irreplaceable. Like there is no the Islamic Republic right now is trying to act like whoever you kill, we have replacement for it, and there's basically it doesn't even hurt because there's enough people to basically be able to do the job. There is no replacement for the people that Israeli and American strikes have been taken out. These are the people with the intelligence, with the experience, years of having being involved in multiple wars, multiple operations, with the respect and the connections necessary. Because remember, in Iran, military commanders are not just military commanders, there's also political personalities. And you get the position that you have because of the connection and the credibility and the leverage, the political leverage that you have as well. So taking out these people creates a huge power vacuum. Not only that, the main threat to the Islamic Republic is infighting. And a lot of people don't understand, like underestimate this. Like we see things exploding, and the Iranian people rising and think like, oh, that's what's going to take the Islamic Republic down, right? But all of this, the main way that this contributes, like they are threatening to the Islamic Republic, but not directly. Like the Iranian people coming into the streets and all of these attacks by United States and Israel, the main way that eventually it will bring down the regime is when the regime forces turn on each other, right? And for the past couple of years, I've been on the Persian channel. The main thing that we have been following is the infighting, right? We have been always looking for signs of infighting because we always knew that that is their greatest weakness. And this is why, for example, Princess of Pahlavi has always been focusing on defections more than anything else, because that's what gets you to the 0 hour of the revolution, when there's enough instability and division among the regime forces that some of them will basically realize, could see, because whatever you see externally, they have ways for them to think that they could respond to that, right? If you see, things blowing up, they're like, okay, aerial attacks, things blowing up, that is not gonna that's we could resist it. Like at the end of the day, there's many of us, some of us die, there's enough of us there to be able to continue. And the regime has enough propaganda to convince them that we're fine, we got this, right? And then the Iranian people coming into the streets, you shoot them, they go home. The regime has enough propaganda to show its own people that we got this, right? But it's really hard to maintain that propaganda when the people who are following these leaders, they see them fighting. When they see them fighting, they're like, okay, this is a house of cards, right? If you tell them that Americans can, if the people who are constantly telling you that the Americans and the Israelis won't be able to topple us. And these people who are coming into the streets, they're Israeli spies or whatever, and we will get rid of them and it will be fine. You will believe that all, like, if you know, the people who constantly believe that, when they see that mommy and daddy are fighting, they're like, holy fuck, there's something wrong here, right? And again, them fighting, if it's between the hardliners and the reformers, that will not have that effect, because the reformers will be considered Zionist agents and enemies anyways by the hardliners. It's the fight between hardliner and hardliner that will convince many people who are still loyal to the regime that things are falling apart, and it will cause people to either not support the regime or maybe even defect or at least run away, right? So for the past couple of years, that's what we have been monitoring on our Persian channel regarding signs of division and infighting and defection. And what we have noticed, like, so for example, ever since the Massa uprising, the fact that the Islamic Republic seems to be enabled to enforce hijab laws in Iran has caused a lot of division, right? The 12-day war caused a lot of division because some people think that they didn't respond to Israel strongly enough, right? But what we have noticed among in all of these years is that the main thing that's kept everything together, the duct tape that was keeping all of this together, was Khamenei, right? Because once Khamenei said something, everybody got on the same page. So, for example, when I was on the Telegram accounts of these people, like looking what they're saying, the way they talk to each other, there were like, there's so many disagreements, and then Khamenei will come out and give a speech, and the next day they all got on the same page and they will stop fighting each other over that. So Khamenei was the main uniter, and there's nothing that could replace that. Not only nothing could replace that, what you're noticing right now is that, you know, what acts as the supreme leader right now is the council of the supreme leadership, right? Which the main member of it is the nobody that is Pezeshkian, which is crazy, right? That Pezeshkian, who is the most irrelevant politician right now in the Islamic Republic, is the head, according to the constitution right now, is the head of the council of the supreme leadership. So right now we're dealing with a Schrodinger's supreme leader, right? Because the IRGC has apparently decided that the supreme leader is Mushtaba Khamenei, but officially there hasn't been any announcement of the supreme who's the new supreme leader. And so the council of the supreme leadership according to the constitution of the Islamic Republic, is meant to be acting as the supreme leader. And we saw a major source of division right now because Pezeshkian, not as the president, but as the spokesperson for the Council of the Supreme Leadership, came out and said that we're not going to be attacking any more countries in the region. And within minutes after, the IRGC was like, who the fuck are you? Right? And they started attacking countries in the region. And not only that, Ege, which is the second member of the Council of Supreme Leadership, he came out and said, we're going to continue attacking the countries in the region. So even within the Council of the Supreme Leader, the council that meant to be acting as the Supreme Leader right now, the two main members, which is Pezeshkian and Ege, they're not even on the same page. And the IRGC is acting like the supreme leadership doesn't even matter anymore. They want the council of experts, the assembly of experts that is meant to be deciding the supreme leader, is they're acting like that's irrelevant, and the IRGC is going to dictate who's going to be the next supreme leader, and everybody has to go with that. So remember, for years I've been telling you that we're seeing a transition of power from the office of the supreme leader to the IRGC, and IRGC is becoming more and more powerful. And I said that with the death of Khamenei, that transition will be complete. And now you can see with the announcement of Pezeshkian that we're going to stop attacking the countries in the region and the IRGC continuing the attack, we could see that that is the official announcement of the irrelevancy of the supreme leadership position and the IRGC being the main decision maker from now on. Here's all the good news, but let me also tell you the bad news is that what I'm concerned about is the ability for the Islamic Republic to just continue shooting into crowds of people, right? Even with all of these weaknesses, right? So everything is going according to plan, and the Islamic Republic is getting weaker and weaker every single minute, right? And uh, it's really bad. And apparently, we haven't even started the main parts of this military operation, at least according to the Americans, right? However, what I'm concerned about that it doesn't take that much to just hand over some guns to some besiegers and tell them not to wait for any commands. That is, I don't know how effective that is going to be, and I don't know what the plan is to deal with that. That is the wall right now in our way. So as effective as the American and Israeli strikes have been, at the end of the day, they're taking out the Basiji bases, they're taking out the IRGC bases, they're taking out the command structure, they're taking out the intelligence operations that they have behind the scenes. And that is going to significantly reduce the suppressing power of the Islamic Republic. And it's going to cause mass defections and people who are going to run away. The son was sorry. I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry, Dad. Like, I love you, like the soldier, right? And the dad is like, take off your uniform. The dad was telling him that I can't come pick you up right now because everything is being taken out. And the son is like, I understand. And the dad was like, make sure you take off your uniform. The son is like, I already have. But dad, they're taking out everyone. So the soldier was so scared that because they're seeing how effective the Americans and Israelis are. So that is going to cause a lot, guys. I truly believe that the vast majority of the body of the Artesh and even IRGC, they're not the type of people who are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna die for Mehdi. Okay, they're not like that. They might say it, but then when the time comes, they're not like that at all. But the problem is that it takes a very small percentage of them willing to do that, especially from the Basijis, for them to be able to cause a lot of damage. And I think that we need to actually come up with, I don't know what the strategy is. Like, there needs to be a plan. I'm sure there is a plan, but whatever the plan is, that hasn't been communicated to the protesters. It hasn't been communicated to protesters. I mean, obviously, the Americans and Israelis know what they're doing, and they have a much more intelligence than us when it comes to the attitude and the readiness of the Iranian people on the ground. And when that moment comes, I'm pretty sure they have already their models regarding exactly what's going to be happening. But whatever planning they have, I don't like when I go to speak to my Persian speaking audience, there is no plan regarding like, okay, so you guys, the protesters will have the numbers on their side, but the people on the other side, they have, they're armed, and the Iranian people are not armed. The problem is that if the Iranian people get their hands on some weapons, that would make the situation very complicated, because then, I mean, your enemy is going to be wearing plain clothes, right? And now the protesters are wearing plain clothes, and your enemy is wearing plain clothes. And it's going to also be very difficult for the Americans and Israelis to identify who's a protester and who's a Basiji. So these are the challenges that we're dealing with. And I saw Gary and Jeffrey wanted to talk about this. Gary is looking for the
Yeah.
mic. Oh, there you
And I'm sorry I'm running late here, but grandchildren always come first.
go. Of course.
Yeah, and Armin, in what I posted earlier this morning, this is a moment that you really can't change. This is going to happen, and it is just the nature of this beast. And this is not going to be up to the Israelis or the U.S. CENTCOM forces to pick out who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. It's going to be up to the people who look Iranian and speak Farsi to be able to figure out who they can trust and who they can't. US CENTCOM and IDF are not going to be on the ground to do this. This is where some of the scenarios that we've been hinting at that are actually already in progress of moving material into Iran from the periphery, from the peripheral provinces, to be able to have an organized fighting force take up the slack. This is not going to be pleasant. And there just is no way that you can stop this from happening. The thing that you can do is abbreviate it. And that's the goal right now, is to abbreviate it. But this is where having 10 non-IRGC and besieged Iranians and one IRGC besieged Iranian, that's where those numbers come into play, because you're going to, if you were taking self-defense training, Krav Maga training, for instance, you know that the first thing you do when you have one bad guy is you fan out around them. You don't all stand in front and you don't all run away. You have to stand your ground. You have to surround them 360 degrees, and somebody is going to take them out. They can't attend to 10 people at once. And I'm sorry, but there is no shorthand for this. This is going to happen.
You don't need to be sorry. I understand. I understand all of this, but yeah, that's a good point. And when it comes to identifying the people, you're very right. When it comes to the Iranian people being the people with the best information on the ground to try to identify who's who. I remember, for example, the like in some of the other uprisings that we had, the Basijis were wearing these bags in a very specific way to be able to identify each other or that who's who, and
Yes.
the protesters immediately identified that, and immediately social media came out and says, guys, anybody who's wearing their bag like this from right to left or something, they're a Basiji, right? So
And
it was really quick how fast they managed to figure that out. Yeah, go on.
and Armin, this is the thing. This is why, Jeffrey and I and others have been hammering home the point, making sure that there is communication on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis in each town, in each province, to maintain a sense of trust, but also to share those signals that who sounds like they're a Basij, who sounds like they're IRGC, but they're trying to hide it. You know the nuance of the language because you speak Farsi. I'm talking to the people on the ground. That's really where that informational sharing and that sense of community trust to be able to identify an outsider, that's where that's going to come in. That's the only way to abbreviate this.
Yeah. Another thing is that if it becomes difficult for the Iranian people to identify them, it's also going to be difficult for them to identify each other, because we have had examples of Basijis shooting Basijis thinking that they're protesters. We have had that before. So I mean, at the end of the day, we could get to a situation where we have the intelligence operations, you know, supporting the protesters, and they don't anymore. So there's also that.
And
Like that's something that yeah, go on.
that's exactly it. So this is really where, for those Iranians who have been finding ways to get sat phones, to get Starlink setups, to be able to go into the Mossad website that's been provided to them, or the CIA one, that's where you're going to get real-time intelligence that's going to be able to say, oh, from the sky, this is what we can see going on. We need you to be aware of that. Move your people in this direction as opposed to that direction. That is an intelligent counterinsurgency by the Iranian
Mm.
people. That's the only thing that will foreshorten this.
Yeah,
But
and
there
one
will
other
be
thing
more and
before.
more material coming in. I can guarantee you that.
Okay, okay. One more thing before we go to Jeffrey. What kind of what kind of material?
Materiel,
Oh,
IEL. Yeah,
okay. Thank
yeah.
you. So one thing else is, like, when it comes to the Artesh, the hope is that before, or maybe at some point in the middle of all of this, a lot of this will go so much smoother if a good part of the Artesh just starts joining the people. I don't know when and or if that's going to happen, but like I know there's going to be loss of life. There's no avoiding that. We're talking about trying to reduce the loss of life, right? And I think that this is why Princess of Pahlavi constantly has been focusing on defections, because if we get defections, we will save so many lives, and this will go a lot easier. Yeah.
And defectors ultimately will be able to, you talk about disarmament, demobilization, and then reintegration. That's the key here. Like what happened in Northern Ireland, what happened in Kosovo, in the Balkans. That's that reintegration of people who take the heroic decision to stop being a killer of the Iranian people. That person will go through a retraining period, but ultimately they will be remembered as somebody who helped to turn the tide of battle. And those heroes need to be acknowledged, even though they had a bad past, they made an appropriate change. But some of those people, when they do get turned over, somebody in the crowd is going to recognize them, and some of them are going to be slaughtered because that person just so happened to kill my brother or my sister or my father. It's going to happen. But the Iranian people, this is where their culture, their civilization, this is where if they band together, maintain close communication now, while everything is
Yeah.
infiltrating from the periphery, this is really where they can shine as a people and really stand out in the annals of history.
Yeah, this is why division within the Islamic Republic is so important. Okay, it's really important for people to understand that a lot of people within Iran who are still fighting for the Islamic Republic, they're in a bubble, right? The reason why they're not defecting is because they still have not been convinced that this is game over, that this is the end for the Islamic Republic. So signaling to them that this is game over is going to, like, I my suspicion is that we're going to see all of a sudden like some defection, some defection, some defection, but then there's a turning point that will happen that you're going to see mass defections. And that will happen when it becomes clear. I mean, it might be clear to you guys here, but it needs to be clear to them that the Islamic Republic is falling. And that's why division within the Islamic Republic is so important, because then they will see it. They will see it from their own sources rather than from our sources. Yeah,
Can I
go
make
ahead.
one last
Yeah.
point though, Armin? And Jeff, I'll be quiet now. The difference here, if you go back to World War II, when Emperor Hirohito told everybody to lay down their arms, that was a divine emperor who did that. Nevertheless, there were still samurais hiding in the jungles until the 1960s and 70s in various islands and the Philippines. The problem with Islam is that you have people who believe that they really want to get to paradise and they're committed to getting there. They will never turn over. But you can't have perfection. But what you can have is the majority of Iranians stand up, recognize what they've done well, what they've not done well, reintegrate, and get to the point that these people who will never go away, we know that they will pop their heads up somewhere. Those people will still be the minority, but you'll have an intact Iran rather than a balkanized Iran. I'll be
Yeah.
quiet now, Jeff.
Okay. No, that was good. That was great. Okay, Jeff.
You guys touched on a lot of the things I've been mentioning out throughout some of the previous shows. So first, like, there's two lines of effort. I'm going to bounce off some of the things you said that kind of are being looked at and should be doubled down on. Why I keep sending. I know you're inundated with emails. I just sent them to you and Goldie and everybody else just to make sure everybody's in the loop. So the first requirement, there's a reason that President Trump outlined the need for documentation of the assholes in the IRGC, Besiege, and other co-aligned groups that were involved in violence against Iranian protesters, to be able to weed out wheat from chaff, right? Post Second World War Germany, there is a big difference between, say, rehabilitating members of the Wehrmacht and or the Waffen SS, and they had to discern or differentiate between those two. The second, and so you have to look at defectors. That said, you have to be sure that the ones you're looking at don't have blood on their hands and separate those. Like they're the Mullah regime's version of the Wehrmacht versus the like elements of, let's say, Artesh and all that, and say the IRGC or the more doctrinaire elements of the IRGC. The second line of effort is centers around training elements within the broader Iranian diaspora, because they have the linguistic and cultural intelligence, right? Inherently, just by being members of the broader Iranian diaspora, to set up neo-Savak and thereby then provide security in a post-Mullah transition period. So you train the cadre outside of Iran amongst Iranian diaspora that then go in and train the trainers that train the agents so that they can sit there and have like a post-Mullah, like transitionary Iranian period of version of the DHS or FBI. And the idea is to minimize the amount of disruption that residual elements within the IRGC, besiege, or say other insecurity flows from around the region could play in trying to upset Iranians, or let's say undermine the maximum like sweetness of the victory Iranians have paid such a high price for. And to that end, there's a lot of good stuff there. I mean, so you're not going to have the idea of having like US or Israeli, well, you might have some Israeli boots on the ground. Like having a strong ground force footprint outside of Iran, first off, like it probably wouldn't be helpful for Iran. That said, the United States has like 2 decades of experience in COIN or counterinsurgency operations. And I'll send it to you, Armin, you and Goldie, and make sure to give it to Tusi and the rest of them. Using, say, resources that are, what is it that, when you have, not when you isolate, when you freeze assets of the Ayatollah and all of them, and use that to set up these different facilities, what I call fighting facilities, to help develop those people. I actually did that for Ukraine. That would allow you to have whole groups of these people then that could provide security for Iranians so that the transitionary period is as smooth as it can be. Right. So in other words, it's like you're training amongst the broader Iranian diaspora, their version of DHS and the FBI. So that way it's ready to go right after the Mullah regime falls, you have these people ready to go. It's not like you have a bunch of white guys from Boston trying to sit there and help out, Iranians, although I'm not saying they wouldn't do that. I'm just saying, like they can't read Farsi. They have no idea they don't know they have no cultural intelligence. Iranians do. And that very much should be done. And there's already being set up to do that. I shared it with Gary. Yeah.